We're going to be speaking today about managing risk in innovation projects. And as you know, risk management is my speciality, it's my passion. And the reason for that is because it works. Because risk management helps us to focus on the things that really matter. And the risk management process gives us a forward-looking radar to scan the future, to see what's coming in our direction, and to prepare ourselves for it in the best possible way. And this is particularly important when we're facing challenges of innovation. So let's start with some definitions of innovation to start with. Some quotes here from Peter Drucker. Innovation is the instrument of entrepreneurs. It's impossible to be an entrepreneur unless we know how to innovate. The American guru Ted Levitt, creativity is thinking up new things, but innovation is doing them. And then another quote, we're not sure who this is from, but innovation is what happens when all else fails. My view of innovation is that it has three roots. Someone has to have an idea about doing something, but the idea is not enough. We also need creativity to be able to implement our idea. But having an idea and having the creativity to be able to make it real is also not enough. We really should be meeting a felt need, a need that is out there in the marketplace, in a customer community. In other words, we have to be doing something that makes a difference. A lot of people have ideas to meet needs, but they lack the creativity to make it happen. Or they're very creative people and they're faced with a need which they understand, but they have no idea how to tackle it. And the worst of all, perhaps, is where you have creative people with good ideas, but what they're producing doesn't help anybody to do anything that matters. So I think these three things together need to be present as the roots of innovation. Innovation, we understand, is about doing something which is new or doing something which is better than what we currently have. But we also need to be doing something which is profitable and which is useful. Otherwise, we'll run out of resources, we'll not have what we need to be able to complete our innovation challenge, and we'll be producing things that people don't want and people don't need. So innovation is doing something new or better in a way which is profitable and useful. Let's just remind ourselves what we mean by risk. We're looking at how risk management can support innovation projects. And I'll go through this quite quickly because I think most of us in PMI should be familiar with these ideas. But let's start with the basic idea, the basic concept that risk is not the same as uncertainty. There is some difference between these two things because all risks are uncertain, but not all uncertainties are risks. So how do we distinguish, how do we separate between risk and uncertainty? There are mathematical principles to help us separate them. There are philosophical principles we could use. But the simplest way is to use the three words to say risk is a subset of uncertainties. Risk is uncertainty that matters. And I think this one small simple phrase, uncertainty that matters, unlocks a whole lot of important ideas about risk. It's the root, it's the foundational concept of risk and risk management. If it's not uncertain, it's not a risk, and if it doesn't matter, it's not a risk. And so how do we know what matters? Of all the millions or billions of uncertainties in the world, which ones do we need to know about? Which ones do we need to focus on? Which ones do we need to try and respond to? The uncertainties that matter are the ones that could affect our objectives. In projects and project management, we're very focused on objectives. We understand that a project has to be scoped in terms of the objectives that it's going to be meeting. The objectives define our success criteria. The objectives determine our plan and our cost and our schedule and all of those other things. And if we say that risk is any uncertainty that could affect our objectives, then that ties risk very closely into things like project success. So if we want a definition of risk, we have to recognize there are two dimensions. There's the uncertainty dimension and there's the having an effect on objectives dimension. In the world of projects, we tend to use these two code words, probability and impact, to reflect those two dimensions. We could use different words. We could use frequency or likelihood or chance to represent the uncertainty dimension, and we could use consequence or effect or some other word for the effect on objectives. But we tend to use the words probability and impact as the generic terms in the world of project management. Now, I hope you like my funny picture that I found on the internet to illustrate impact. The mouse is facing a situation which is clearly uncertain, and he's doing some risk management. And you'll see that the mouse has seen that there's a trap, and the risk is that he could be killed or injured. There's a potential for a negative impact. But the mouse, like a good project manager, is managing his risk. He's got his little helmet on, and he's trying to minimize or avoid the possibility that he's killed or injured. And as project managers, clearly we have to do similar things. There are things in our project which could kill us or injure us, which could waste time or take extra money and cause overspends, which could destroy value, or which could damage reputation, or which could have a safety impact. And so we need to be like the mouse and see those potential negative impacts and prepare for them and try to avoid them or minimize them. But there is another potential uncertainty in the situation that the mouse is facing, which he's very interested in and which he also needs to manage. And in this situation, it's the cheese that the mouse is really focused on. He has to manage not just the uncertainty of stopping the trap from springing, but he also has to manage the uncertainty of getting the cheese out of the trap. And actually, he has to manage those two uncertainties together. It's not certain that he can get the cheese, and it's not certain that he'll spring the trap, but he'll only succeed if he gets the cheese without springing the trap. In projects, there are uncertain positive things that we want to get out of our projects. We call them benefits or value, products and services that people want or need. And our challenge as project managers is not just to stop the bad things happening in our projects, but it's also to make the good things happen in our projects. And both of those things are uncertain, and particularly in projects which involve innovation. So like the mouse, we have to manage two types of uncertainty, bad ones and good ones, and we have to manage them both at the same time. We have to create value and benefits at the same time as stopping overrun, stopping overspend, and staying within our project scope. And the challenge of innovation is to find the best possible way to do that. And of course, there's always a better way. So then when we come to our definition of the impact dimension, in terms of thinking about risk as uncertainty that matters, the uncertainties that could help us also matter. Uncertainties with positive impact are as important as uncertainties with negative impact. We should be looking for the uncertainties that could help us to achieve our objectives, as well as the uncertainties that would prevent us from achieving our objectives. We call these opportunities. Opportunities are things which are uncertain. They may or may not happen, but if they do happen, they help us, and we're pleased that they've happened. Threats are uncertainties which may or may not happen, but if they do happen, they hurt us. We're sad that they've happened. We're upset about it, and we want to stop them. So both opportunities and threats are uncertainties that matter, and both of these need to be managed. When we come to define risk, we are connecting the ideas of uncertainty and effects on objectives, and we see this in the PMI Chapter 11 definition of risk as an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has an effect on an objective. But in this definition of risk which we find in the PMI, there's something in there added in to talk about the type of effect that matters. And PMI, since the year 2000, has included in here a phrase that represents cheese as well as traps. We don't actually say cheese and traps, of course, but we say that a risk is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on an objective. So now we have a double-sided concept of risk, that there are good risks, we call them opportunities, which are uncertainties that help us achieve our goals. And risk also includes bad risks, downside risks, which are uncertainties that if they occur, stop us achieving our objectives. So the concept of risk includes both opportunities and threats. Now this should be no surprise to us in the PMI community because, as I say, it's been part of the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge Risk Chapter, for over a decade. If risk includes both opportunities and threats, in fact, innovation also includes both opportunities and threats. We innovate because we want to do something new which hasn't been done before, which is profitable and useful, but we're not sure if we can do it. There's always an innovation challenge. So there's the opportunity of creating something new and better and useful, but also the challenge, the threat that we might not be able to do that within the available time, the available budget, the available resources, skills and competencies and so on. So the challenge of innovation is to manage both upside and downside, to create value, to create benefits, to create innovative products and services, whilst also managing the possibility that things could go horribly wrong. Fortunately, the risk management process can help us. We see this idea that innovation is a blend of success and failure, of things going well and things going not so well, all around us in the examples of innovation. Let me just pick a couple of examples. I travel a lot with my business, and one of the places I know very well is Heathrow's Terminal 5 at the airport. If you remember the story when Heathrow Terminal 5 opened, it was a disaster. There were problems with the baggage handling system, there were problems with the security, there were problems with the car parking, and people thought it was an absolute disaster. It was a failure. Now, Heathrow Terminal 5 is a wonderful place, very efficient, very effective, a pleasure to be part of, and everything is moving very smoothly. The innovations that they introduced into Heathrow Terminal 5 were a challenge which brought with it both success and failure. We see the same with, on a more simple scale, the idea of the post-it note, which of course was a failed adhesive, the sticky stuff that didn't stick. And somebody saw another opportunity within that failure to create something which has been extremely successful. And one third simple example would be in the pharmaceutical sector. We've all heard of the product called Viagra, which is a failed product to help people who have difficulty with their hearts. And of course, when they got the trial results back and they discovered that it wasn't working very well for people with heart problems, they also discovered that there was, shall we say, an upside which they could manage and have been very successful. And many of the other innovation examples that we can look at are combinations of success and failure, of people managing the upside whilst also minimizing the downside. The risk process can help us with this. What we're looking for is something that will help us to maximize our successes and minimize our failures. Let me illustrate that with this idea which we call the Innovation Ecocyle. An ecocycle is a concept that comes from the natural world, looking at systems like forests or systems like populations of animals or birds. And we find that there's a natural life cycle within these ecosystems where you'll find that something grows and develops and becomes bigger and stronger, and then it reaches a tipping point where it turns over and starts to decay and fail. But then the decay and failure leads again to another success and another period of growth. And this idea of the ecocycle has been picked up in the management literature and used to illustrate a number of different things in the life cycle of business and of projects. It's also applicable to innovation. Innovation starts with a period of growth, and we might call this an innovation zone, where we innovate, we do something new and different. Once we've learned something new and different, we consolidate that into a set of products and services which we then explore and expand as far as possible. But innovation always ends up by falling into failure, by reaching a brick wall that is hard to push through, which is preventing us from succeeding any further. And that first point of failure is an important part of the innovation ecocycle. So we will always innovate until we reach a boundary that says this far and no further. And we know we've reached that boundary when we have our first failure. What should we do when we reach a failure in an innovation cycle? Well, we could, of course, just give up. But what we should do is to enter another part of the ecocycle, to enter into the development part of the ecocycle, where we reflect on what happened. Why have we just failed? What did we try to do that didn't work? Then we learn from that failure, and we understand the roots of the failure. We make sure that we change our processes where necessary, change our approach in order not to fail again, and then we press through the failure until we reach a new point of success. And innovation is about maximizing the top loop, the innovation loop, and at the same time minimizing the development loop so we get back into success as quickly as possible. What we're trying to do, of course, is to maximize our opportunities for innovation and minimize our threats. And innovation, in fact, is a cycle between these two zones of innovate and then develop, and then innovate more and then develop more. That picture looks rather like we will be going round in circles, and that's not really what we want to do. So perhaps a better way to illustrate it is like this, with a series of loops that actually make progress towards our goal. So there's an innovation loop which is successful until we reach our first failure. Then we enter into a period of learning and reflection where we push through until we reach another success point that we can then innovate again. And the challenge is to make the part above the line bigger and longer, and the part below the line shorter and quicker. So what we're finding in innovation is there's an alternation, there's an exchange or a series of phases between an innovation phase and a development phase. And the focus of innovation changes between supporting that innovation phase, and once we find we're in that development phase, making sure that we learn and quickly get back to innovation and success. So what we need really to make the innovation eco-cycle work is some kind of process that would support both sides of this loop, that would help us to maximize our opportunities in the innovation part of the cycle, and that would also help us to minimize our threats and the downside when we're in the development and learning part of the cycle. Do we know a process that we could use to maximize opportunities and minimize threats? Well, of course we do, don't we? It's the risk management process. And the PMBOK says that the point of the risk management process is to identify, analyze, and respond to risk in a way that includes maximizing the probability and impact of positive events, and also minimizing the probability and impact of adverse events. So the PMBOK is very clear that the purpose of risk management is to address both threats and opportunities in a single integrated process. And if we look at our standard PMBOK process, which starts with some kind of initiation or setup phase, we call it risk management planning, and then into identifying the risks, assessing and analyzing them, planning responses, and then implementing those responses and reviewing how things have changed, that cycle works very well for both upside risk and downside risk. It's an integrated process that enables us to minimize our threats and maximize our opportunities at the same time in a single process. Now, because we need a process like this to maximize our opportunities and minimize our threats for the innovation eco-cycle, my suggestion is that we could, maybe we should, perhaps we must, use the risk process as a basis for supporting innovation. And I'd like to focus on three parts of this particular risk management process to show you how we can use the risk process to support innovation. Why would we do this? Why do people include opportunities in the risk management process? People do it because it gives us a combined process where we don't need something new and different for opportunities. We can use an existing risk management process to identify and manage opportunities proactively by just extending techniques that we know about, which we can use for our downside risks and threats. We can do this by minimizing our overhead. We don't have to develop any new processes. We don't have to develop any new tools and techniques. We don't have to have any extra training. We end up with being very cost effective doing two things through one process. It's very motivating for a team to have a structured way of identifying opportunities which will help them to work faster, smarter, cheaper. And of course it leads to fewer missed opportunities, more benefits, and ultimately an improved chance of being successful in our projects. Why wouldn't you want to do these things? And this is why PMI promotes the idea of including opportunities in the risk management process. So let me tell you which of these three areas we're going to focus on in the rest of this webinar to help us understand how the risk process can support innovation in projects. The first is to say, where are we going to find our innovation opportunities? And I'd like to suggest to you that the risk identification step in our risk process is tailor-made. It's perfect for finding innovation opportunities. Not all of those innovation opportunities will be equally good. We might not want to follow all of them. We should perhaps prioritize them. Some of them will be crazy ideas that will never work, and some of them will be ready-made gold mines that we need to implement as quickly as possible. So the second thing we need to do is to pick the winners amongst the opportunities. Which are the innovation opportunities which are worth pursuing? And I think the qualitative risk assessment part of our risk process is exactly right for picking out the best opportunities to pursue in our innovation projects. And just picking winners, of course, doesn't make it happen, and so we do need to have some way of turning those winner ideas, those innovation opportunities, into reality. And I think the risk response planning part of the risk process is where we can do that. So we're going to focus in the next part of this webinar on these three steps of the risk process and show how they can help us to find opportunities, pick the winners, and make it happen in our innovation projects. So first of all, the risk identification process. Here we're looking for ways of finding innovation opportunities. Let's just remind ourselves what opportunities are. Opportunities are positive risks. That means they are uncertainties that matter. They are uncertain because an opportunity may or may not happen. And if it does happen, it's going to matter because it affects our ability to achieve our objectives, and it affects it in a positive way. The problem with the English language is that it's very flexible. We can use words in many different ways. And the word opportunity is also used in different ways. So we need to be clear that we are talking here about positive risks. We are not talking about benefits. We're not talking about what people might say, there's an opportunity to do something, an opportunity to succeed, an opportunity to create an innovative project. That may be a business opportunity, but it's not an opportunity within the project itself. So we're not talking about benefits. The benefits are the things that we want to produce. The opportunities as positive risks are uncertainties within the project, which when it delivers and succeeds will produce the benefits. An opportunity is also not a response. We often talk about having the opportunity to do something, the opportunity to act. These are things which are choices. We could choose to do them or not to do them, but they're not uncertainties that matter. We just have a choice to make. Shall we do this or shall we not? Shall we use one development method or shall we use something different? Shall we outsource our development or shall we do it in-house? These are just choices. So they're not the kinds of opportunities that we're looking for. And then there's scope creep. And a lot of people are worried that opportunity management is the same as scope creep, about finding an opportunity to do something else, to add something to the project. And we're not talking about that either. We're talking here about uncertainties that will help us achieve this project. The uncertainties will help us to work faster, smarter, cheaper towards these project objectives. So we're not talking about growing the scope or extending the scope. We're talking about achieving the scope in the best possible way. Perhaps it might help to use some alternative words. Some people see opportunities as good luck, uncertainties that we trip over and we say, oh, I'm really pleased that happened. Or some nice surprise where we're really pleased that a good thing occurs. Or things that maybe we would dream about in our best moments, thinking about the good things that could happen on our projects. And these are other ways of describing opportunities. The question is, can we make ourselves more lucky? Can we find more nice surprises? Can we make our good dreams into reality? Well, maybe the risk identification step of the process can help us to do that. There are lots of different techniques that we're familiar with to find risks, and I've listed some of them here in the order that most people use them. Most people run workshops with some kind of brainstorm, or have checklists or prompt lists, or have interviews and so on. And there are many other methods. The problem is that we want people in innovation projects to think creatively, to think outside the box. And very often these techniques for identifying risk don't help us to think outside the box. They're telling us to look in the box and see what's wrong with the box and where are the problems with the box. And there's another problem with creative thinking, and that is that very often management doesn't welcome it because it can get very messy if we think outside the box. And so we're constrained by our management to always think within the constraints of the project, and that doesn't encourage creative thinking. So we do have a bit of a problem with our standard risk identification techniques, that when we focus in the box, we tend to focus on the things that might go wrong. And we do this by habit. We're very familiar with the idea of looking for things that might go wrong with the project. And a lot of the techniques we use are very limited. They tend to push us in that general direction of finding the things that might go wrong. So then how can we use them to find innovation opportunities? We could, of course, just try very hard, make sure that we have a brainstorm which really is focused on upside risks. Maybe we try and build an opportunity checklist, but it could be quite difficult. Or instead there might be techniques that we can use which are particularly focused on finding upside risks at the same time as downside risks. And we call these two-dimensional risk identification techniques. There are quite a lot of these, but let me suggest two of them to you, which you might be familiar with. The first is Swot analysis. This is an obvious technique to use for finding threats as well as opportunities, because O stands for opportunity and T stands for threats. So let's look at that in a moment. And another possibility would be to develop the idea of a fault tree or a failure modes analysis into a benefits tree or a success modes analysis. SWOT analysis first. The idea here is that there are four different perspectives. S and W, strengths and weaknesses, describe characteristics of our organization or our project which are good or bad. So strengths are the characteristics or resources that help us to achieve our objectives, where weaknesses are the limitations or defects which stop us achieving our objectives. Strengths make us resistant to risk, and weaknesses make us vulnerable to risk. The O and the T parts of SWOT analysis are our opportunities and threats. These are the risks. Opportunities are positive, upside risks that, if they occur, could positively affect achievement of objectives. And threats are our downside risks, the ones that, if they happen, would negatively affect achievement of objectives. Now, SWOT analysis is very often used at a strategic level to help us to find strategic goals and strategic opportunities and so on. But we can use it within innovation projects. In fact, we can use it within any project to help us to identify opportunities and threats. The way we do this is recognizing that there are two pairs of characteristics in a SWOT analysis which are very different. Strengths and weaknesses are facts about who we are. They describe the organization, they describe the project team, they describe the situation we're in, and they describe those facts which are good or bad, which are true today, which will help us or hinder us in achieving our goals. Whereas opportunities and threats are different. They're about what we're trying to achieve. Opportunities and threats are things that, if they happen, would affect our objectives. There's another difference between strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, and that is that strengths and weaknesses are certain, we have them now, whereas opportunities and threats are uncertain. They might or might not happen in the future. SWOT analysis is based on a very simple idea, that who we are affects what we do. And so if we're looking for opportunities in our innovation projects, some of those will arise from the strengths that we have as an organization or a project team. If we're thinking about the threats that we're vulnerable to, some of those will arise from our weaknesses as an organization or a project team. And so we can use this idea that strengths lead to opportunities and weaknesses lead to threats to help us to find both opportunities and threats through a SWOT analysis. And the idea of a structured risk statement might help us to do that. So here are two examples of structured risk statements. We call it risk meta-language, but it doesn't really matter. It's about separating out different parts of the risk statement. And we could say we know the things we're good at and the things we're not so good at. Because we have strengths, some good thing might happen on our innovation project that would represent an opportunity. And unfortunately, because we have weaknesses, some bad thing might happen which poses a threat. So SWOT analysis is a structured brainstorming technique which starts with the top pair of perspectives. Who are we? What are the good things and bad things about our organization? And then looks at the implications of those things in terms of uncertainties they might create in the project, with good things coming from our strengths and bad things coming from our weaknesses. It's a very simple, well-structured technique which helps us to find both opportunities and threats. And I recommend you give it a try. Not just on innovation projects, of course. Now, the second technique that I mentioned is benefits trees. Now, benefits trees are like fault trees. A fault tree is where you think about something that could go wrong, and we put that on the right-hand side of a diagram, and then we work to the left to work out the things that would cause that failure or that fault to occur, and then think about the drivers which would lead to those causes of failure. We could do something very similar, thinking about upsides. And in this sense, we build a benefits tree by starting, again, from the right-hand side, by thinking about a benefit that we might like to create. And then we think about, for example, working faster, smarter, cheaper. Then we work backwards through the benefits tree to the left by thinking about the root causes that might give rise to that benefit. What could help us to save money? We look for those causes of the benefit. And then finally, the last step is to think about the uncertainties which would drive those causes and lead to the benefit. So it's a simple three-step process: identify the benefit, look for the contributors and drivers, and then find the uncertainties that would affect them. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the idea of a fault tree. This is exactly the same thinking, just from a positive perspective. Maybe it would help just to show you a very quick example. And if we're looking to innovate by developing a new product from enhancing an existing product, one of the benefits we might be looking for is to be able to do things faster and cheaper. Obviously, there are other benefits as well in terms of new market and new functionality and so on. But here, one of the benefits will be to work faster and cheaper. What might lead us in a new project, an innovation project that enhances an existing product, what might happen to reduce time or reduce cost? Well, one thing that might happen is that we might need fewer changes to existing products to create the new product. The other is that we might find ways of working at higher productivity. If either of those things happened, they would lead to the desired benefit. Now we can build our benefits tree by going one further step to the left and saying, can we think of any uncertainties that might occur that would lead to those drivers of the benefit? And maybe we can think of lots of different things. if we think about how we might end up needing fewer changes to our existing product to create the new one, well, one possibility is there might be fewer modifications or even none required at all. Maybe we can just use the existing products as they are. Or maybe we might find that the regulations in our planned new marketplace are not as unusual or different as we thought they might be, and in fact we need fewer changes in order to meet the requirements of the new marketplace. Or it might be that our regulatory environment changes to have less stringent, less difficult or challenging requirements, which mean that we need to make fewer changes. These things on the left might never happen, but they might, and we could identify them as innovation opportunities which might be worth pursuing. How could we increase productivity? Clearly that would be a good thing to make sure that we got our new product at a reduced time or a reduced cost. One way is that we could get particularly skilled people allocated to our team. It might not happen, but if it did happen, that would be very useful and it would increase productivity and lead to reduced time or cost. It represents an opportunity that might be worth pursuing. Or alternatively, some other project may be cancelled, or we might find that the priority of another project is reduced and additional resources may become available from another project that we can then take onto our project and increase our productivity. All of these things on the left represent opportunities because they are uncertain. If they occurred, they would enhance the drivers which lead to the benefit. And so we build our benefit tree from the right to the left and use it to find things which might occur that would represent opportunities to innovate. So that's a simple example of part of a benefits tree for a real project. And there are other techniques that we could use to find opportunities. Whatever technique we use, we should get out quite a large number of opportunity or possible opportunities that would help us in our innovation projects. Not all of those opportunities will be the same as useful as one another, and so we do need to prioritize them. How can we do that? In our standard qualitative analysis part of the risk process, we have a technique called the probability and impact matrix. It's a two-dimensional matrix. I've shown one here which has 5 dimensions, 5 steps in each dimension. You might use a bigger one or a smaller one. And we map probability and impact. We have definitions of high, medium and low for these things for our project. And then we plot risks onto the grid and we say that the ones which are in the red zone are the top priority, the ones which are in the yellow zone are medium priority, and the ones in the green zone are low priority. And we're quite used to this idea of defining our scales and then ranking the risks using a matrix like this. Can we use a matrix like this to prioritize innovation opportunities? Things that we might be able to do to help us work faster, smarter, cheaper, to create products which are new and better, useful and profitable. Well, I think we can use this matrix almost exactly as it is. The only problem is that the impact dimension is usually used only for negative impacts, for delay, for extra cost, for reduced benefits, for reduced performance or productivity. So perhaps we should use 2 separate matrices, one grid on the left to represent threats which have negative impacts, and one grid on the right, the same kind of thing, to represent positive risks, opportunities that have positive impacts. And here you'll see we've just replicated the grid on 2 sides, one to show positive risks and one to show negative risks. The only difference between these 2 sides is the sign of the impact, so negative on the threat side and positive on the opportunity side. Actually, it might be helpful just to modify this slightly by rotating or flipping the right-hand side where we have our opportunities. And here we can show the 2 red zones coming together in the middle by making sure that we have on the negative side our scale goes from low to high, but on the positive side the scale now goes from high to low, bringing our 2 red zones together into the middle of our diagram. Why would we want to do that? Some people say it looks pretty. They call it the butterfly matrix. And what we're really doing it for is that it creates an area of attention, an area of focus, where we have the worst threats and the best opportunities coming together into the center of the grid, and these represent the things that we need to pay attention to, that we need to focus on first. The red threats are the worst because they have a high probability of occurring, and if they occur, they have a high negative impact. The red opportunities are the best because they also have a high chance of happening, and if they happen, they really help us. And so we can use this grid to prioritize our innovation opportunities by saying the things that are in the red zone, we should do them first. They're easy to get, and they represent a big benefit. We might prioritize second the opportunities which have a big positive impact, but they're harder to get. They have a lower probability. They are definitely worth exploring to see if we can find ways of making them happen. Our third priority will be those which are easy to get hold of, but they don't have so much benefit, and then we leave till last, or maybe we don't bother at all, with the opportunities in the bottom corner. So we can use the standard approach of the PI matrix, the probability impact grid that we're used to prioritize our innovation opportunities. Then we have to decide what to do. Clearly, we have to recognize that both probability and impact are important dimensions. We need to assess them both, and sometimes that's not as easy as it might look, but then we have to decide what we're going to do. And we can use our standard risk response strategies to help us respond to opportunities. Or can we? The standard response strategies that we find in most risk processes include these. Risk avoidance, which is about removing the uncertainty. Risk transfer, which is about getting someone else to take them away. Risk reduction or mitigation, which is about making our risks smaller. And then a fourth response, which I call the forgotten response because most people don't think about it. It's actually accepting the risk, taking the risks which are left over. And these are our four typical risk response strategies: avoid, transfer, reduce, and accept. And we'll find those in the PMBOK. Can we use those for opportunities? Oh, I don't think so. They're not really the right things, are they? They really only apply to negative risks. So maybe we need to think about positive responses as well. We're used to these ideas of avoid, transfer, reduce, and accept. What are the equivalents for opportunities? Are there things we can do which are the same as our standard threat responses, but which apply to upside risk? And we can find those positive response strategies by generalizing the threat strategies and then finding the opportunity equivalent. So the opportunity equivalent to avoiding a threat, making the uncertainty gone completely, is to exploit an opportunity, make it happen, remove the uncertainty by making it definitely happen. The equivalent to threat transfer, where somebody else takes the bad thing away, is opportunity sharing, where we involve somebody else to bring the good thing in. Threat reduction is about changing the size of our threats to make them as small as possible. We could enhance or grow our opportunities to make them as big as possible. And as our last response is to accept threats that we can't manage in any other way, so we could have an acceptance strategy for opportunities that we can't manage proactively. We just wait and see what happens, perhaps with a fallback plan or a contingency. So there's a wide range of opportunity strategies that we can use to make our innovation opportunities a reality, just like there is a wide range of responses we can use to make the threats smaller or go away. There is, of course, another possibility, and a lot of people use this when they're managing threats. Maybe we just pretend it's not there and it'll go away. And the danger with that is we might do that for our opportunities too. And then we have our heads buried in the sand and we miss the things that, if they happened, could help us. You might say ostriches don't really do this. This is just an urban myth, and it comes from the way that the sand undulates and hides the head of the ostrich. Well, ostriches may not do it, but I know quite a lot of project managers who do, who just pretend maybe there's no risk, perhaps it'll go away. Well, we can do a lot better than that, and we should. So, we've got to recognize there's a whole range of different responses that we could implement, But those responses are not the end of the process. And let me just remind you of that by telling you a very quick story. There's a riddle which goes like this. There are 5 frogs sitting on a log, and 4 decide to jump off. So how many frogs are on the log? And if you've heard this before, you'll know that the right answer is there are 5 frogs on the log still, because there's a big difference between deciding and doing. And the point of telling that story here is that we can identify innovation opportunities, and we can prioritize innovation opportunities and find the good ones, and we can plan responses to turn those into reality. But if we don't actually jump, if we don't implement our responses, if we don't do something new, then we don't innovate. Then we don't create opportunities and turn them into reality. We have got to get the frogs off the log and actually make sure that we take action to generate and to capture our innovation opportunities. Well, I think time has just about run out, so let me give a few final thoughts before I turn back to Praveen to handle the questions. There's no doubt that innovation projects are risky, because innovation is about doing something which is new, that hasn't been done before, or doing something that has been done before in a better way, and trying to do that in a way that's both profitable and useful, that meets a need whilst being creative. And projects have constraints. Projects that we use to deliver innovation are very tightly constrained, and that creates a risky challenge, a risky environment within which we're trying to innovate. The risk management process can help us by giving us that forward-looking radar that scans the future and allows us to see things coming with enough time to respond proactively. The risk process is designed to address both threats and opportunities. Proper risk management is not just about preventing things going wrong, it's about helping things go right. That's what risk management is for, and that's what the challenge is that we face in innovation projects. So risk management can help us to find innovation opportunities by using the risk identification approach to find positive uncertainties that matter. And we can use techniques, simple techniques like Swot analysis or building benefit trees. Once we've found innovation opportunities, it's easy to prioritize them using the two dimensions of probability and impact and a standard probability impact matrix to find the best opportunities. And once we've found those great opportunities, then we can use our risk response strategies on the positive side to exploit or share or enhance or accept our opportunities, and then make sure that we take the action that we need to turn them into reality. So I think it's true, it's obvious that the risk management process that we're familiar with in project management, which is well described and defined in Chapter 11 of the PMBOK Guide and other risk management standards, this risk process that we know and love can easily be applied to innovation projects to help them succeed by finding innovation opportunities, picking out the best innovation winners, the best opportunities to pursue, and then taking action to make it happen. The challenge that we face in innovation is how to create a situation where we're going to succeed and thrive in a changing world. Which one of these two little animals are you? We could be the dinosaur that just grows bigger and bigger and bigger and eventually becomes extinct because the environment and the context changes. Actually, the world belongs to little furry animals like you and me who learned how to innovate, learned how to adapt, learned how to modify themselves to the environment that they had to exist in. And this is the challenge for us in terms of innovation projects. We have to innovate or we'll die. Well, I hope you found that useful. I hope it's presented you with some new ideas and some practical things that you could implement and which will help you to succeed in your innovation projects. We have got some time left for questions. I hope